We all had that moment where we think, why do they react like that? Or why is this so easy for me, but so hard for them? What if the friction we feel in our homes and workplaces isn't a character flaw or a lack of effort, but simply a difference in wiring? Welcome back to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, where we explore practical ways to understand ourselves better and live with greater emotional clarity. I'm Yusuf, and my guest today is Marita Littauer, author of over 20 books, including the long standing bestseller Wired That Way, Foundational Guide to Understanding Personality Types. For more than 2 decades, Marita has helped people improve communication, reduce conflict, and strengthen relationships by understanding how personality shapes behavior. Today, we are talking about how personality awareness can transform the way we live and work with others. With that, I welcome Marita to the show.
Yusuf, thank you so much. That's a great introduction. I love how you did that.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a pleasure. So let's just get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the idea of your show of healthy mind, healthy life, because so much of the stress that we take on ourselves is due to a misunderstanding in relationships, which really comes down to a misunderstanding of someone's personality, their inborn ability, and how they see things, and literally how they're wired.
Yes, indeed. And one misconception I hear a lot is that if someone truly cares, they should naturally communicate the way we do. I'm curious, where does this assumption get people into trouble?
Well, there is truth to that assumption, because if we don't care, well, let me rephrase that. If we do care, we're going to be willing to step outside of how who we are and how we see things to look at it from someone else's perspective. But if you don't understand personality differences, you can't do that. You can't see how that other person is. I'll give you just a real quick example. Um, my husband and I have totally opposite personalities. And that is often the way it is. We tend to marry someone who is opposite from us, which really is a good thing, because that person, what I like to say is, where he is weak, I am strong. Where he is strong, I am weak. And so together we bring a full complement of skills to the table, full skill set to the table. I hate to say this, but I'm his third wife. He's my second husband. You'd think if I was this great expert on relationships, I wouldn't need a second husband, but I couldn't control my first husband. He did what he wanted to do. So here we are. Anyway, my husband is a personality type that is what I like to call a peaceful phlegmatic. That means the low key, introverted, easy to get along with kind of person. His secondary personality is what we call the perfect melancholy, represented by the color blue. And by the way, we represent the peaceful phlegmatic by the color green. And he's the peaceful phlegmatic, perfect melancholy. And the perfect melancholy is the detail conscious, schedule oriented type of person. My husband is a CPA, perfect skill set for his job. He sits
Mm.
alone in an office all day on on the calculator, dealing with people's taxes, etc. When he comes home at the end of the day, he's exhausted. He's done
Mm.
nothing thrilling, and he's exhausted, and he sits in the recliner, and he wants to just kind of veg out in the recliner. Well, because I understand his personality, I understand, well, I'm the total opposite and I like never rest. I understand that he really needs that. He's not lazy. He's been working hard all day. He provides well for our household, but he needs that rest. One day early in our marriage, he said to me, "You're my first wife who's ever really understood me." Now, to me, that is powerful. You know, he's had two previous wives who I assume harassed him. Why don't you get up and go do? Why don't you? And because I understand his personality, he gave me that kind comment.
What stands out here is that awareness doesn't excuse poor behavior, but it does explain why good intention can still miss the mark.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
And so I mentioned my husband is the green and the blue, the peaceful phlegmatic and the perfect melancholy. I'm the opposite. I'm the popular sanguine, which is the fun loving, loud, outgoing person. And I'm about 50% the powerful choleric, represented by red. Sanguine is represented by yellow. And the powerful choleric is the strong, driven, goal oriented kind of person. So you can see how totally opposite my husband and I are. You might think on the third marriage, we could have found someone who's more like us, but here we are. Even understanding the personalities as I do, I still married someone who's totally opposite from me. But understanding each other's personalities makes a world of difference. So, exactly as you said, good intentions can fall short if you just don't have that basic understanding of each other's personality type. And it works in a personal relationship or a professional relationship equally the same.
Yes. There is a popular scientific rule, I would say, at least, that opposites attract each other. But in relationships, most of the time, people advise to find someone like yourself, but that doesn't happen. Ultimately, or most of the time, we find ourselves with someone who is polar opposite or very opposite from ourselves. Why do you think that happens?
Well, like I said earlier, I think it's because really we're designed that way because we fill in each other's needs. Where he's strong, I'm weak, and vice versa. So together, I mean, if I married someone who was just like me, um, the house would be a mess, my finances would be a mess. Now we would have a lot of fun. And occasionally I do run across people in the years that I have been giving public speeches on this topic. I do occasionally find someone who actually, when they come up to me and they say, I think I'm married to my partner's the same as me. And I'll talk to them and occasionally I'll go, yes, you are. I agree with you. You are. And then I will ask them, is this a second or third marriage for either one of you? And almost always, without exception, I don't want to say there's no exception, but almost always it is a second or third marriage for one of the two at least, and possibly both partners. And usually, I believe the reason that is that the reason they're in a second or third marriage is because the first one didn't work. I mean, occasionally it's due to death, but more often it's due to divorce. The first relationship or just parting of the ways if they were never married in the first place. But it's due to the first one failed. The first one didn't work. So when you go to date again, when you begin to start dating, you consciously say to yourself, well, that one didn't work. And so I want to find someone who is either opposite of the last one or more like me, which would be really the same thing. And so occasionally people who have had a bad first relationship or a bad relationship consciously go looking for someone who is more like them or less like the one that didn't work. So it does happen that you do find someone who is the same personality type married to each other. And in my book, Wired That Way, there is a whole chapter on marriage where we address this. And I kind of have a chart that shows, well, I'll just back up for a sec. My premise is that we tend the best marriages, the marriage that work the most easily, have what I call one square in common. And for our listeners, if you can just picture an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and you divide it into four quadrants, you make the top left yellow for the popular sanguine, the top right red for the powerful color, the bottom right blue for the perfect melancholy, and the bottom left green for the peaceful phlegmatic. And you can just do that in your head. You don't have to, you can picture it. So I'm the top two. My husband is the bottom two. That's the hardest combination to make work. Gratefully, I understand all this because truly Both of his parts of his personality are the introverted, the pessimistic, and the low key. Both
Mm,
parts of my personality are the optimistic, the extroverted, the high energy. And so for us to come together takes work. But if you have someone who, say, my personality, just to make it easy, the top two, the sanguine and the choleric, and let's say my husband is the melancholy and the choleric, we have that one square in common. So as a marriage, we're going to be a high energy marriage. We're going to be going places and doing things, but we're also going to be fighting for control because we are both wired to want our way. And so if you don't understand these personalities, I'm sure you can see that it's very easy to have a difficult relationship. It's very easy to see why people don't make it.
mm, that's true. When people repeatedly clash at work or home, what deeper personality patterns are usually at play beneath the surface?
Well, I like to talk about living in our strengths. And I really think that's one of the things that's unique about the personalities, as we call it, the program that's in my book, Wired That Way, because we focus a lot on not just identifying what your personality type is, which is what a lot of the other programs that are out there do, but we focus on living in your strengths in the book and in the personality profile we have available, it comes with a complete list of personality strengths and weaknesses for each personality type. And when there's a lot of clash, it's usually because a person is living in their weaknesses rather than maturing, evolving, growing, and living in our strengths. And I see that as one of the great assets about this program, the personalities, is once you become aware of what your personality is and you see what your strengths are and you see what your weaknesses are, then you can, as a intelligent human being, you can make a cognitive decision that I'm going to get better. I'm not going to live in my weaknesses. I want to be someone who lives in my strengths. Now, if you have a colleague who does not have this self awareness and that colleague continues to live in his or her weaknesses, that can be a real problem. And that's where a business or a corporation or a department bringing in someone such as myself or even asking people to read this book can really help get everybody onto the same page. I spoke one time for an optometrist group. They had me come back a few years later because they had a bunch of new employees who didn't know this material. And they put on their name tags a little dot of the color of what their personality is. So if they're mostly the popular sanguine, they'll have a yellow dot. If they're about 50-50 sanguine choleric like I am, they'll have a yellow dot and a red dot. And that way, everybody in the office could identify with that person's personality. But they're the only place I've ever known that actually did that. But they said it made a huge difference. And there was a gal in the office who was in a management position and she was a powerful choleric. And she had a tendency to just pound out an email that was in email terms, it was kind of barking, and
Yeah.
she would have to tell people there's no tone here. And they began to understand her that she wasn't being rude, which is how they interpreted her, but this is just who she was. She had a lot going on and she didn't really see a need to bother with please and thank you. She just barked out the order. And they learned from her, they learned that's who she is. And so it can make a huge difference, even if the other person doesn't live in their strengths. If you work with that person and you kind of understand who they are. And again, as you mentioned, Joseph, at the very beginning, you talked about caring. And caring is a huge piece of this because it's easier for me to just be me. It's easier for me to not adjust myself to who you are. But if I care enough, if I'm mature enough to do that, it makes a huge difference in relationships.
Let's say that someone has or someone is starting to understand their own personality type. What's a practical step they can take to improve a strained relationship?
To improve a strained relationship, okay, is really to identify, it's not just what your personality is. You need to understand that other person. And again, this is another feature that I think is unique to our program. In my book, Wired That Way, there is a whole chapter that we call visible clues. And the visible clues section helps you identify the personality type of that other person. Now, we do sell a paper personality profile, and you can take this, and we have it online also, but we do sell this personality profile. But if you're in a strained relationship with someone, it's a little difficult to go to that person and say, "Excuse me, I'm having a tough time with you. Would you take this personality profile so I can figure you out?" In a strained relationship, that's not really going to work. But if you know what to watch for, and I'm talking about body language, I'm talking about clothing, I'm talking about voice, I'm talking about in the workplace personal space. I don't know, well, of course, this is going to be audio, but you could see the mess around me. That's my natural kind of habitat, unfortunately. But you can tell when you look at someone's personal space. Maybe it's their car, maybe it's their desk. You can tell if they're that more scattered, popular, sanguine person, or if they're that more detail, tidy. I had an employee at one point who looked at my desk and said, "I don't know how you can work here. It gives me a headache just looking at your desk." And we can identify someone's personality by watching for those clues. And then the very most important thing, which again I think is something that the other programs out there don't address, and I have a whole chapter on it, of course, is meeting the other's emotional needs. And that is where the real relationship changes. Now, I couldn't just answer your question by saying, well, you've got to meet their emotional needs. Because first, you have to identify what their personality type is and then address their emotional needs. Again, my husband, opposite from me, he needs sensitivity and space as a perfect melancholy. And as a peaceful phlegmatic, he needs respect and a feeling of self worth. So, knowing that, I'm able to address him. And that's kind of part of letting him sit in the recliner when he gets home from work because he needs that space. He needs that mental vacant. In fact, I remember one day I was doing the dishes. I was in the kitchen at the sink, and there's a window right above my sink, and it faces my patio. And he was sitting out there in the chair in the patio doing nothing. He had his face to the sunshine, and he was sitting out there. And when he came in, he said to me, "You know what I was thinking while I was outside?" And I said, "No, what were you thinking?" And he said, "Absolutely nothing." And that's happiness for him. He was thinking absolutely nothing. Now, I can't even imagine that, but we're totally opposite. And so he had that space, and I had the sensitivity to allow him that space. So, to improve those relationships, you have to first identify what their personality type is. And secondly, most importantly, is meet their emotional needs. And as we talked about in the very beginning, that takes caring.
Marita, is there any way for listeners who want to go deeper into this work? Where is the best place to find your books or learn more about what you're doing now?
Yes, of course, there's a way for them to do that. My website is simply thepersonalities.com. The word the, THE, personalities plural.com. Also, my book Wired That Way and the paper version of the personality profile is available on Amazon. And you can just type in my name, Marita Littauer, or Wired That Way, or both, and you will find it. And if you're for Kindle Unlimited members, my book is available free on Amazon. So if you want to buy the book or One Personality Profile, I really suggest people go to Amazon. But if they want to take the online personality profile, which is only $4 for someone to take the online personality profile, it's at thepersonalities.com. And when you take that and you put in your email address, you'll receive an email when you finish the personality profile that will give you a link to all the supplemental material that is in the personality profile. So the online profile itself is just kind of the test part, but you do get access to all the other material that's in the 16-page paper booklet.
Perfect. And for the listeners, all these links are in the show notes, so just go and check those out. Marita, is there any last message that you want to leave us with?
Well, I do. I want to share that it is possible to improve relationships with others, even those that you're in a difficult place with. But as you mentioned at the beginning, it takes caring enough to step outside of who you naturally are to meet the needs of those around you.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us on Healthy Mind, Healthy Life.
I appreciate it. It's been a treat to talk with you.
Yes. And to our listeners, if today's conversation resonated, take a moment to reflect on one relationship where understanding personality could shift the dynamic. Understanding the personality doesn't fix every problem, but it gives you a clearer lens, and clarity is often the first step toward compassion and healthier relationships. Sometimes insight, not effort, is what changes everything. And I'll see you in the next